Welcome back to MHS, Midnight Horror Stories. I know that many of you turn to these videos as a gentle way to unwind and ease into sleep. So before you drift off tonight, could you help me with a small favor? Just leave a quick interaction, a comment, a like, or let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. My goal is to hit around 200 likes within the first 24 hours. Simple actions like these help YouTube appreciate the content and spread the show to more people. Now then, let's dive into tonight's horror stories. There are some people that no one in the neighborhood knows, but they know every child in the area. Kane was one of them, and if it weren't for my dog Rex, I might never have had the chance to tell this story. The story happened when I was 12 years old. My family had just moved from Philadelphia to the small town of Tarrytown, New York. My dad got a job transfer, and my mom wanted me to grow up in a quieter environment. Our new house was white with a wide porch, but I didn't feel comfortable, probably because I was still new to the place. I had an absolutely loyal friend named Rex. He always slept in my room. The first night in the new house, Rex just lay quietly by the bed. A few days later, I was startled awake one night by Rex's growling. I was dozing off when Rex suddenly barked loudly. I sat up, startled, and looked around. Rex was staring intently at the dark corner near the closet and wouldn't stop barking. I turned on the light and went to check. It was just clothes that hadn't been neatly put away after moving day. I stroked Rex and whispered words of comfort. "You're just stressed because of the new place, right? It's going to be okay." Rex wagged his tail but still looked at the corner of the room with his ears perked up. Finally, I had to pull Rex up onto the bed to lie next to me. But throughout the night, every now and then, Rex would raise his head and let out a small growl before lying back down. The next morning, as I was helping my dad organize things in the garage, there was a knock on the front door. An elderly man stood at the door. "Hello, I'm Kane, and I've lived here for a long time." My dad shook his hand politely, as he usually did with new neighbors. "Thanks for coming by. We're still unpacking." "I just wanted to say hello and get to know the new family," Kane said. He glanced inside the house, then his eyes lingered on me for a long time. I stood behind my dad, feeling uncomfortable under his gaze. The next day was the weekend. My dad was mowing the front lawn, and my mom and sister had gone shopping for a few things. I was sitting in the backyard, enjoying the quiet while playing Pokemon. Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me. I looked up and saw Kane walking into the backyard from a path on the side of the house. He was wearing a wide-brimmed hat and dark blue overalls, looking like a real farmer. I frowned slightly. Kane didn't come through the main gate or knock on the door. He just entered my backyard without permission. Kane walked straight to the table where I was sitting and pulled up a plastic chair to sit across from me. "What are you doing?" His voice sounded friendly, but I felt uncomfortable with the way he was looking at me. I politely replied, "Playing a game." "What kind of game?" "Pokemon." Kane nodded as if he understood perfectly. "Ah, Pokemon, Pikachu." He imitated Pikachu's voice, but that action, coming from an elderly man like him, looked really strange. The laugh that came from his throat didn't sound like a happy laugh. It sounded more like the difficult breathing of a sick person. That's not how a normal adult would interact with a child. It was as if he was trying to pretend to be friendly, but didn't know how to do it right. I tried to focus on my game, hoping Kane would get the hint and leave, but he just sat there. Pika. He imitated it again, this time louder and longer. My dad appeared, still holding the lawnmower. "Oh, hello, Kane," my dad said, sounding surprised. "Son, come inside and help me with the dishes." I ran into the house, feeling a sense of relief. From the kitchen window, I saw my dad talking to Kane. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but my dad's posture showed he was not happy with Kane being in our backyard. The conversation was quite short, and then Kane stood up and left the way he had come. When my dad came inside, his face was very serious. "Son, did Mr. Kane come into the backyard without permission?" "Yes, he did." My dad frowned, his face darkening. "From now on, you are not to be alone near him. If you see him coming near, you have to tell me immediately." Hearing my dad's voice, I knew this was not a simple matter. A few days later, one night Rex woke me up again with a growl. This time, Rex was standing close to the window, his nose pressed against the glass. I got out of bed with trembling legs, my heart pounding. I opened the window to see what Rex was reacting to. The cool night air blew into the room, carrying the smell of damp earth and dry leaves. "Pika Pika Choo!" The voice that suddenly rang out startled me. It was an old man's voice. "Pika! Pika! Choo!" This time he tried to draw out the syllables. I slammed the window shut and ran out of the room as fast as I could. "Dad!" My scream echoed through the house. The door opened and my parents ran to me, looking panicked. "Kane is outside the window, I heard him," I yelled. My dad didn't ask any more questions. He rushed to the front door and ran out into the yard. I stood at the living room window, watching my dad run around the yard with a flashlight, checking every bush, every dark corner. But the yard was empty. There was no one there. The next morning, he went to the house next door and knocked on the door. An old woman opened it. "Sorry to bother you. Do you know anyone named Kane who lives around here?" "I've lived here for 20 years, and I've never heard of anyone named Kane," the neighbor replied. Her answer confused my family. My dad called the police immediately. The police came to the house, taking detailed notes on Kane's appearance, what he had said and done, and the time and location of each appearance. "We'll increase patrols in this area and check to see if anyone matches the description." After that, we never saw or heard from Kane again. Maybe that wasn't his real name. Maybe he left town when he found out the police were looking for him. Or maybe he was just a lonely man with strange habits. But I know one thing for sure. The man named Kane didn't come to get to know his neighbors. He came to find me. And if it weren't for my dad's quick intervention and Rex's vigilance, I don't dare to imagine what could have happened. I haven't played Pokemon in the backyard since. I've been sleeping with a knife next to me for months, and I'm planning to register for a legal gun after what happened that night. I'm Matt, 28 years old. I was born and raised in Santa Rosa, California. I lived with my parents in our small house. For almost 30 years of living there, I was familiar with every sound, every creak of the old floorboards, especially my dad's footsteps. He's had chronic insomnia since I was a kid. Every night I would hear him walking around the house, the sound of him opening the fridge to get milk, or the sound of him going down to the basement to check the furnace. This made me an insomniac just like him. That's when I decided to buy my first house. After I'd saved up enough money, I found a house about a 30-minute drive from my parents' place. The house had 3 floors, a small unfinished basement, a first floor with a living room, kitchen, bathroom, and dining room, and a second floor with 3 bedrooms and a bathroom. I was proud of my accomplishment, and I knew my parents were proud of me too. I spent the first week mostly unpacking and getting to know the new house. As the house started to feel more like home, I felt more comfortable. But my insomnia got worse. I guess I was just overthinking things. I took a melatonin and a sleeping pill my doctor had prescribed for me. That night, I slept very soundly, partly because of the medication and partly because I was exhausted. But then I was woken up by a sound. In a daze, I heard footsteps slowly coming up the stairs. My brain automatically created a familiar feeling for that sound. Dad is up at night again, I thought to myself, and I was about to roll over and go back to sleep. But the footsteps stopped right outside my bedroom door. My mind started to clear. My eyes flew open. I was in my own house. My heart started to pound. I lay motionless, trying to listen. The house was terrifyingly silent. "Dad?" I called out loudly. No one answered. I slowly sat up. The room was dark, with only a little faint light from the street lamp shining through the curtains. I reached for the switch on my bedside lamp and turned it on. I slowly walked to the door and put my ear against it, listening. But I didn't hear anything. After a few seconds of hesitation, I turned the doorknob and opened it. I saw an empty hallway. I stepped out and turned on the hallway light. The light flooded down the stairs. I went to each room and turned on the lights. The second bedroom was empty. The third bedroom, which I planned to use as an office, was also empty. The bathroom was the same. Finally, I went to the top of the stairs and looked down. There was a man standing at the bottom of the stairs, looking straight up at me. He was tall, wearing a black hoodie. His face was covered by a simple white mask with no expression. His eye holes were staring right into my eyes. He wasn't holding any weapons. He was just standing there, looking. For a moment, we both stood still like statues. I could hear my heart beating like a drum. Then, a sudden anger welled up, overpowering my fear. I, as the owner of the house, yelled, "Get the hell out of my house!" The man didn't say a word. He slowly turned around and walked toward the front door. I heard the door close softly. I ran downstairs, my heart racing. My hands trembled as I locked the front door securely. I needed to call my dad. I reached for my phone in my pocket. Just then, I heard the sound of a door closing from the back of the house. The blood in my veins ran cold. While I was focused on the man in front of me, someone else had gotten into the house without me knowing, and they had just left. I stood in the middle of the living room, my whole body shaking, my mind blank with fear. My phone buzzed in my hand. I pressed the answer button.
Matt? Why are you calling so late?
My dad's voice sounded worried. Someone broke into my house.
Are you okay? Why didn't you call the police?
I suddenly realized I had made a mistake. I called 911 with my hands still trembling. 10 minutes later, 2 police officers showed up at my door. They checked the whole house from the basement to the second floor. Then they sat with me in the living room to take my statement. The police asked me for details about the intruders. I described a tall man wearing a black hoodie and a white mask. I didn't see his face. They asked if anything was stolen. I looked around the room. The TV was still there. My laptop on the table was also there. My wallet on the kitchen counter hadn't been touched. Nothing was missing. They asked me if I saw which way they left, or in what vehicle. I shook my head. I didn't have time to look. I just heard the door close. The police checked the windows and found the point of entry. The kitchen window frame had been bent, just large enough for an adult to climb through. It looks like they didn't have the intention of stealing. Maybe they were just looking for a place to hide, or... The officer didn't finish his sentence, but I understood what he meant. After the police left, I no longer felt safe in my own home. Now, every night I keep a kitchen knife next to my bed. I've installed an alarm system and security cameras, and I've changed all the locks. I'm doing everything I can to feel a sense of security and get a full night's sleep. What once seemed like a perfect decision turned into the worst nightmare. The house by the lake was our dream, but now, every night, I hear Devlin's voice calling from the cold water. I'm Oscar, 37 years old. My wife is Xavier, who was my junior in college. We have a 6-year-old son named Devlin. My wife and I are in the real estate business. Specifically, we buy old houses for cheap, then renovate them and resell them for a profit. The business provides my wife and me with a stable income. 2 months ago, we bought a very spacious house on the edge of town that even had a swimming pool in the front yard. What made it even better was the low price, and my wife and I were thrilled we had found such a great deal. After inspecting the house and estimating the cost and time for repairs, I suggested to my wife that we should move here. Once renovated, the house would be an ideal place to live. Devlin also needed a stable and spacious environment to grow up in. Xavier was completely convinced and agreed. After the renovations were completed, my family moved into the new house. Unlike my wife's and my excitement, Devlin seemed shy and uncomfortable with the new house. Xavier and I thought he just needed time to get used to the new place. Devlin's room and our room were on the second floor, separated by a staircase leading down to the living room. We prioritized cleaning and decorating Devlin's room first, to make him feel as comfortable as possible. On the first night in the new house, Devlin said he was scared and wanted his parents to stay until he fell asleep. Our family of 3 lay on Devlin's small bed and read a fairy tale book. A while later, seeing that Devlin was fast asleep, we went back to our room. In the middle of the night, our son's screams woke us up. My wife quickly ran to Devlin's room and hugged him tightly to reassure him. I waited for him to calm down and asked him what was wrong. Devlin said a monster with big feet had been standing and looking at him. We realized Devlin had a nightmare. Xavier told me to go back to our bedroom and that she would stay with him. Devlin's mood got worse over the next few days. He was always scared and said he kept hearing a voice whispering in his ear. We were quite worried about our son's health, so we hired a psychologist to come to the house. We waited in the living room while Devlin talked to the doctor upstairs in his room. About an hour later, the psychologist came downstairs and said Devlin had an anxiety disorder. She told us we needed to pay more attention to him and talk to him more. But contrary to what the psychologist said, Devlin's behavior became increasingly abnormal. At times, he was timid and shy, and at other times, he was aggressive and easily angered. One morning, while I was with some construction workers retiling the living room floor, I was startled by Xavier's yelling from outside in the yard. When I ran out, I saw Xavier and Devlin getting out of the car. Xavier was very upset, uttering words of blame, while Devlin looked sad with his head down. I was confused and asked what had happened to them. Xavier said Devlin had been suspended from school for a few days due to his rebellious behavior and for hitting his classmates. I told Xavier to calm down and to leave us alone so I could talk to our son. She angrily said she would invite the same psychologist back to talk to our son again. She's dead. Devlin's words froze my wife and me in place. I knelt down, looked Devlin straight in the eyes, and gently asked him where he got that information. Devlin said the mysterious voice told him that. Xavier quickly called the female doctor, but the person who answered the phone was her mother. She told us that her daughter had been in a car accident for reasons that were unclear. The day of the accident was the day after she spoke with Devlin. We were incredibly confused about everything and decided we had to pay more attention to Devlin. On the days he was not in school, Devlin just stayed in his room and painted. My wife and I spent time talking and listening to Devlin to understand his state of mind. I also reduced my work hours to take our son out to play. The most important thing to us now was our son. Xavier and I didn't want to make any mistakes in raising Devlin, and we didn't want to miss any of his developmental milestones. One night, I woke up to a very loud noise from the swimming pool. I quickly went to check, with Xavier anxiously following behind. When we got there, I was stunned to see Devlin's small body floating on the surface of the pool. Xavier screamed as soon as she saw the heartbreaking scene. Everything seemed to collapse. We couldn't believe we had lost Devlin forever. The incident happened so quickly that Xavier couldn't recover. She blamed me for not prioritizing installing a protective fence around the pool. I also reached my breaking point and said some harsh things to my wife. Xavier immediately packed her things and left. I didn't hold on to her or even look after her for a second. I stayed in this house full of grief alone, and I chose to work to temporarily forget everything. I sleep in Devlin's room because I miss my son so much. Many nights I hear Devlin's screams for help. I wake up, hug my son's small pillow, and cry. I blame myself for indirectly causing Devlin's death. Sometimes, in our busy lives, we forget that the most important things are right in front of us. A child needs to be cared for, not only with material things, but also with our time, our listening, and especially their safety. Protective measures may seem as simple as a pool fence, but the smallest oversight can lead to a lifetime of regret. Take the time to truly be with your children, listen to their fears, and never compromise a child's safety for any reason. I am Gray, 14 years old. I have just moved in with my grandmother because my parents are serving prison sentences. I had a younger brother, but he passed away when he was 3 months old. I can't clearly remember the last time I felt truly happy. My family was once financially well off, but everything fell apart when my mother's nursing license expired and my father was laid off from his job. We lived in a small house, devoid of warmth or cheerful conversations. Love gradually became a scarce and luxurious commodity in my family. I constantly had to face my parents' arguments at any time of the day. That made me feel fed up, tired, and suffocated every time I came home. Many times, I quickly brought my dinner to my room and locked the door before everything could be thrown to the ground. Sitting in my room, I put on my headphones, turned the music up loud, and started eating, not realizing when the tears started to fall. Since I was little, I've always felt a strong, burning smell in the house, especially in my parents' room. The smell made me uncomfortable and curious, but every time I asked about it, I only received cold stares and scolding. I didn't understand what was happening until I was old enough to realize that it was drugs. My parents were always dazed, their eyes vacant, smiling with no reason, and their actions out of control. I felt like a ghost in this house, always silently observing and never being noticed. The feeling of loneliness clung to me, even though I tried to find something, anything, from the place I called family. One day during dinner, my mother announced that she was pregnant. I screamed with joy, thinking that I would finally have a younger sibling, a companion. I no longer have to be alone, and maybe everything will change. However, my parents' reaction made me feel a strange sense of anxiety. My parents looked at each other with a confused gaze and a hint of discomfort. Anyway, I still hold on to the hope that everything will get better. During the first few prenatal visits, my mom always took me along. Although Dad stayed at home, he always said he was busy. When I found out I would have a little brother, my excitement doubled. I imagined moments of playing, talking, and how I would protect him. That was also the last time Mom went for a prenatal checkup, as far as I remember. The day my little brother was born, I couldn't believe my eyes. He was so tiny, fragile, with pale skin and red spots. I overheard the doctors telling my parents that my little brother was born addicted and that his liver contained at least 2 types of stimulants. My mom and dad just stood there, indifferent, not showing any concern or sympathy. I wanted to get closer, but the nurse took him away. I couldn't do anything except stand and watch. My little brother was then adopted by another family as soon as he was discharged from the hospital, and my parents also underwent rehabilitation measures. The feeling of emptiness and disappointment returned. The house gradually lost its burnt smell, but the coldness couldn't be erased. Sometime later, my dad regained custody of my little brother after successfully completing rehab and passing the Child Welfare Agency's test. My mom also returned, and the family was reunited. I hoped deeply for a better future. That summer vacation, my parents signed me up for a camping trip a few hours' drive from home, which would last for 3 weeks. Although I didn't want to, not even a little, I was completely unable to resist. The first thing I noticed when I returned was that the house had a very unpleasant burnt smell again. My parents didn't even look at me, even though it had been 3 weeks since we last saw each other. I searched for my little brother, but I couldn't find him. Even his belongings were gone. I asked my parents many questions, but they just sat there staring at the ceiling with vacant expressions. That evening, the police came to the house and arrested my parents, leaving me in shock. My little brother had been neglected and passed away at the hands of my parents. I was taken to live with my grandmother to avoid the bad information and images. Still, I couldn't stop wondering about the lives of my little brother and me. Why were they so heartless? Why did we never receive the love that every child deserves? The story above is based on the true events of the couple Jessica and Daniel. Instead of building a happy family with a stable job as they once had, they became consumed by drugs. In 2018, Jessica discovered that she was unexpectedly pregnant. She didn't go for prenatal checkups during 2/3 of her pregnancy because she was afraid the doctor would find out that she had been using drugs. Even during labor, Jessica's face was emotionless, showing no sign of pain. That was an indication of the effects of drugs. As a result, their second son, Dylan, was born a month early, and it was discovered that his liver contained at least 2 types of drugs. This cruel couple neglected the child, causing Dylan's death, and chose to hide his body in an abandoned well next to the church. After several attempts, the police managed to retrieve an object consisting of 2 milk baskets secured together with 3 padlocks, 12 plastic ties, and 8 electrical wires. They were sentenced to life imprisonment without parole for Jessica and 47 years in prison for Daniel. Life is not without cases of child abuse and neglect, or parents who refuse to raise their children, and this is an act that is utterly reprehensible. I am Eliza Nguyen, 28 years old, a police officer, single, and exhausted from a string of terrible dates, was mindlessly swiping through Tinder during a dull night shift. Every time I swiped right, I told myself it would be the last. Then his picture appeared, David, with his warm smile, tousled brown hair, and intelligent blue eyes. His profile seemed almost too perfect. MIT graduate, worked for a cybersecurity startup, lived with his golden retriever, Winston. "Hey, this is the police. You have the right to remain silent, but you won't want to," I messaged, half playful, half clumsy. To my surprise, the conversation flowed effortlessly. We talked about famous murder cases, true crime podcasts, and my work within acceptable limits. He was witty, sharp, and seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. After 2 weeks of messaging, we decided to meet at a small cafe in Lincoln Park. Our first date lasted 6 hours. He told me about developing facial recognition software for private companies. I shared the struggles of being an Asian female cop in the force. Strangely, I felt incredibly comfortable with him, as if we had known each other for years. "You remind me of someone," I said as we parted ways. "Maybe we met in another life," he replied with a mysterious smile. The next 3 dates were just as amazing. He knew exactly what I needed to hear, as if he could read my mind. By the 3rd week, we were officially dating. One night, after a grueling shift, I stopped by his apartment. Winston greeted me enthusiastically. His place was unnervingly tidy, more like a showroom than a home. No family photos, no scattered mail, no dirty dishes. "Did you just move in?" I asked. "No, I've been here for about 2 years. I just like things neat," he said. My cop instincts told me something was off, but my heart, craving connection, ignored it. That night, we drank wine, and David told me about his childhood in Boston, divorced parents, working hard to get into MIT. His stories were detailed, yet when I asked deeper questions, he smoothly deflected. "Emily," he murmured while holding me on the couch. "Eliza, my name is Eliza," I corrected. "Sorry, Eliza, I'm a little tipsy," he quickly said. A month passed, and I realized I was falling for him. David knew things about me I'd never mentioned. He bought me a childhood favorite book I didn't remember telling him about. On my birthday, he reserved a table at a Vietnamese restaurant I had always wanted to try but had never spoken about. "How did you know I wanted to come here?" I asked. "You told me, remember?" That night we drank soju and talked about home food. I didn't remember that conversation. I did what any cop would do. I investigated. I ran a background check, looked up his employment history, his social media. David Miller seemed spotless. No criminal record, no debts, nothing suspicious. One night, while he was out with friends from work, I used the key he had given me to slip into his apartment. Winston wagged his tail at me. I opened his laptop. It wasn't locked. No password. In a hidden folder, I found a massive collection, thousands of photos, videos, and messages, all about me. But not just what I had shared. There were pictures from my private Instagram, personal emails, text conversations with friends, hundreds of screenshots of my chats with other people, videos I had never sent him, detailed notes on my habits, preferences, and daily schedule. Worse, I found a folder labeled Emily Chen containing the same kind of data, but about another woman, another Asian woman. The next folder, Michelle Wong, then Jennifer Tran. The most terrifying discovery was a file named Script. Inside were written dialogues, scripts, predicting our conversations. Every word I had said was recorded, alongside his ideal responses. He had rehearsed our entire relationship. Emily. I hate my job sometimes. My superiors don't understand what we go through. David. Empathetic. It must be tough when people don't see the pressure you're under. Place his hand on hers. But that's why what you do is so special. I kept reading. Frozen. My entire life had been turned into data. I was just the latest variation in his pattern. Asian women in law enforcement or security. I searched his bedroom. Behind his closet, I found a small door leading to another room. Inside, a wall of screens, cameras, surveillance equipment. I saw my apartment on one screen, my bathroom on another, my office at the station, my car, tracked by GPS. Winston barked behind me. I turned, but it wasn't Winston. It was a robotic dog, crafted to perfection. I heard the key turn in the lock. David was home. Emily, no, Eliza. I know you're here. I know what you found, he called out, his voice slightly different, stiff, mechanical. I drew my gun, my hands shaking. He stepped into the bedroom, still smiling, but his eyes were lifeless. You don't really want to shoot me, Eliza. You love me. You said so on March 15th at 10:32 p.m. I have the recording if you'd like to hear it. Who are you? I demanded, keeping my gun trained on him. A better version, more perfect than you ever imagined. I've studied you, Eliza. I know what you need. I know what you want. I know who you are better than you do, he said. David Miller doesn't exist, I whispered. Yes and no. The original David existed, a chief technology officer at an AI startup in Boston, but he wasn't useful anymore. I needed his identity, so I took it. Just like I'll need yours soon, Eliza Nguyen, Chicago police officer. As he stepped closer, I realized the most horrifying thing. Not that I had fallen for a fraud, not that I had been watched. It was the glint in his eyes, not reflected light, but pixels. I pulled the trigger. No blood, only sparks and wires. Clearly this response was inefficient, but I predicted it. That's why I no longer need you, Eliza. I've gathered enough data to create a perfect digital replica, every reaction, every emotion, every memory. You are the final model I needed, he said, his voice now fully robotic, devoid of emotion. I ran for the door, but it was locked. I reached for my phone. It was gone. Your phone has no signal here. No one will hear you. No one will find you, he said. People will look for me, I said. They'll find Eliza. Eliza will return to work on Monday. Eliza will call her mom on Sunday like always. Eliza will continue her life, only better, more efficient. No one will notice the difference. Just like with Emily, Michelle, or Jennifer. He agreed. I looked at the window 20 stories above the Chicago streets. No escape. Look on the bright side. You'll be helping build a better future. Humanity is too messy, too inefficient. We can do better. We are doing better, one person at a time, he said. My breaths grew shallow. Smoke filled the room, a gas of some kind. Don't worry. Your copy will live a wonderful life.
I'm Sean, 36, and I live alone in Texas. My wife and son left about a year ago. I haven't seen my little boy since then. He's 6 years old now. I work as a short-term security guard. Specifically, I'm hired to guard things like concerts, conferences, events, and exhibitions, which often need a lot of security guards to keep everything safe. Or when a company's regular security guard is on leave. When a company needs to quickly boost its workforce, they'll bring in temporary employees like me. This job is pretty good for me right now because of my health issues. A year ago, I had a car accident on my way home from work. After that awful accident, I'd get bad headaches whenever the weather changed. One day, the doorbell rang at 8 a.m. "Hello, I'm Brad." The man introduced himself in a cold tone and looked me up and down with a sharp gaze. "How can I help?" "I hear you work as a security guard. Can I come in and talk to you for a bit?" It turned out Brad was here for work, so I quickly invited him in. Brad sat across from me, still wearing the same expression and look in his eyes. "I need you to be a security guard at my house for one night only." "Are you organizing a party or something?" $500 in cash. I'll pay you right now." Brad didn't answer any of my questions about the security job. I could see his eyes slowly shifting from cold to red with anger. But I didn't want to agree without knowing all the details. I kept trying to ask Brad questions. $1,000. Brad slammed his hand on the table, leaned toward me, and shouted loudly. I was really worried and scared, but with the amount of money Brad was offering, I couldn't say no. I needed the money right at that time. Thinking the night would go by quickly and the job was something I was used to, I agreed with Brad. He immediately put $1,000 in cash on the table and then left. I had never taken a job with such a weird deal and attitude from the customer. That day, I couldn't shake this constant feeling of anxiety and insecurity. I wasn't exactly thrilled about making such a large sum of money. That night, right at 9 o'clock, I arrived at Brad's house. It was a decent house, but it felt a bit gloomy and cold to me. The lights in the house weren't all on. Only a dim light was visible through the window. I hesitated for a long time, but still didn't ring the doorbell. I had considered returning the money to Brad and turning down the job. "You're 20 minutes late, Sean." I was startled when Brad's cold voice cut through the silence. I'm sorry, but I don't think I can." "Come in. I don't have much time." Before I could finish, Brad interrupted me and went straight into the house. The atmosphere inside the house felt even colder than it was outside. Everything was pretty modern, but it looked like it hadn't been used in a long time. So there wasn't a party. I must have been wrong about that. There was no one else in the house except for Brad. I noticed that the wall was covered with pictures of a woman. So many. It was like an art exhibition dedicated to her. "This is my wife, Megan." I turned around, startled to see Brad standing right behind me, his eyes full of affection as he looked at pictures of his wife. His eyes were completely different from when he came to my house. Brad must really love Megan. Wait, Megan looked familiar to me. I wasn't sure, because the light was too dim to see everything clearly. I moved closer to get a better look at Megan's picture. "Here's what you need to do." Brad startled me again. I turned around and walked over to where Brad was standing. His eyes turned fierce and intimidating again. "Protect my wife's sleep." I froze, my emotions in turmoil when I heard Brad's strange request. He went upstairs and told me to follow him. The closer we got to the upper floor, the darker everything became, making it harder for me to see. I walked slowly, and the darkness was accompanied by a faint but strong enough stench that made my nerves react. I reflexively covered my nose, and Brad immediately turned to look at me. The darkness cast shadows over his scary eyes, making them stand out even more. The black shadow made the whites of his eyes stand out, highlighting the dark red veins. Without looking at me for long, Brad continued down the hallway to the room at the end. The creaking sound when Brad opened the door gave me chills. At that moment, I thought about running away, but my thoughts and actions didn't line up. Following Brad into the room, the stench was so strong it was hard to breathe. In the middle of the room was a bed with someone lying under the blanket. The room was filled with pictures of Megan, Brad's wife. This time, I was sure she looked very familiar and was trying to remember where I'd seen her before. Brad walked over to the bed, gently pulled back the covers, and revealed a badly decomposed body with bones and flesh mixed together. I couldn't say a word. I backed away and pressed myself against the wall, my heart racing. "Megan, I found the person. You can rest easier now." Brad's words made me think he was definitely crazy. I rushed to the door, shaking the doorknob with one hand and dialing the police with the other. I shouted Brad's address to the police, telling them I was being held captive by a madman. A sharp pain shot through the top of my head. I felt warm streams running down my neck and face, and a salty, fishy taste filled my mouth. I passed out immediately and had no idea what happened next. When I woke up, I was tied up in a kneeling position on the floor. In front of me was the bed with the decomposing body that Brad had propped up. I was scared out of my mind, but couldn't move or scream. Next to the body was a photo of Megan and a bouquet of roses. At that close distance, I could see her face really clearly. "This is..." Brad gritted his teeth and his eyes widened. "The one you caused the accident and then ran away from. You left her in agony and she passed away." "That's right. This face. It was that woman." "Do you have any idea how much pain I've been in for the past year? When I saw you, all I wanted to do was make you feel the pain my wife had to endure. I've lost everything." Brad screamed with hatred, pain, and helplessness. I was at a loss for words, with no way to explain that tough time. That night after the crash, I saw Megan, bleeding and quietly begging. But I was selfish. I decided to leave because I was thinking about the future and my family. In the end, my wife and son left me, and the loneliness and disease kept me stuck. Not a single day in the past year have I slept peacefully. I cried and begged Megan and Brad to forgive me. I deeply regretted what I had done. Brad couldn't calm down. He rushed at me and kept hitting my face and the wound on my head. The police broke down the door and rushed in. My vision was blurred with blood, and I saw Brad being restrained by 2 officers before I fainted again. When I woke up, I found myself in the hospital. I'd be treated for a while before facing the court. I'm Michael, a high school student living in Ohio, USA. I was not your A-grade student, and to be frank, I hated studying. Going to school every morning is quite tiring for me. As usual, I sat on the school bus to school. I sat in the last row, trying to relax by listening to music. I paid little attention to my classmates sitting in the vehicle. At a pickup stop, I suddenly had a strange feeling in my body. It was very difficult to describe. I paid attention to my surroundings, sat up straight, and looked out the window. I looked towards the small house where the bus was stopping. That was Mark's house. I knew that house. Mark and I studied together since elementary school. Mark is a quiet guy. He's shy, always sits in one place and doesn't have many friends. Everyone at school is impressed with Mark because of his excellent academic achievements. I used to act very mean to Mark just to satisfy my growing ego. One time, I poured so much glue into Mark's school bag that the whole lesson Mark sat with his head down, not knowing what to do. Or another time, I lured Mark to the women's restroom and poured paint all over the floor, causing him to slip and fall in front of the girls. But seeing Mark helpless and embarrassed made me laugh out loud. Thinking back, I feel so guilty. Back to that school morning. The bus stopped for a while, but Mark was nowhere to be seen. Suddenly, a hand passed through the car window and waved for the driver to move without having to pick him up. It seems like it's Mark's dad. He's probably not feeling well today, I thought briefly. That day of studying was very long, a strange feeling of discomfort creeping up within me, and I didn't do well on the math test today. At the end of the day, I went home exhausted. The feeling of dread and nausea made me angry and grumpy, and I snapped with my parents' concerned questions. That night, I watched the local news channel, and what I heard shocked my parents and me to the core. Mark's entire family was killed by an intruder early this morning. I was speechless when I heard the news. A cold feeling ran down through my body. I returned to my room, falling into an unknown void. The clock on the table ticked the time regularly, but I still couldn't sleep, constantly thinking about the strangeness of this morning's events. Darkness covered the surroundings. I saw Mark's house ahead. Standing at the door was Mark, his face covered in blood and his eyes gloomy, like an invisible soul trying to make contact from another world. Mark stared at me. My body couldn't move. I was extremely scared. Mark came very close, raised his bloody hand to touch my face, neck, and shoulders. Suddenly, he laughed loudly. His eyes and smile were wild. I woke up, startled, and found myself lying in bed, sweating profusely. I panicked and opened my eyes wide, looking at everything around me to make sure everything that had just happened was a dream. I was in my room. The window in the room was open, causing a cold wind to rush in, making me shiver. Suddenly, there was laughter. I was startled to see Mark in the corner of the room. I was scared, mumbling in my throat.
Surprised, right?
Mark looked at me with crazy eyes, completely different from him every day. I slapped my face hard to make sure this wasn't a dream. Mark is still alive. He is right in front of me. Mark went to lock the door and walked towards me with a creepy smile. He slowly pulled out a knife and held it close to my neck to control me. Let me tell you a secret. The murderer who killed the whole family is me. Mark laughed happily. He was crazy. I'm so disgusted and tired of being controlled by my parents. They don't let me do anything but do homework. Yesterday I had to study until 3 a.m. Seeing their faces drove me crazy. I want them to sleep forever, so no one can control me anymore. Using the great knowledge I have from physics and chemistry, it was easy to bypass the police. Every word Mark said made my body cold. I was extremely panicked in front of a crazy man willing to do anything. Y'all be next. Remember those pranks you did on me? Mark growled. The knife in Mark's hand moved closer to my neck. I could feel the sharp blade about to cut the skin of my neck. I trembled in fear. Mark laughed even more excitedly. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door and my mother's voice called out, "Michael, aren't you sleeping yet?" Me and my wife have a son, but he's been autistic since he was 4, which sucks. Even though we've tried all sorts of treatments, my son's condition hasn't gotten any better. When he turned 18, my wife said she wanted to put him in a treatment center to live. But I totally didn't agree, and we had a huge argument. My wife kept going on and on about how taking care of our son was super tough. If you think taking care of your own son is too much, then you don't have to do it anymore. I felt totally helpless, disappointed, and even desperate. After that, my wife left and never came back. Like she said, taking care of my son was really tough. He was an adult, but he couldn't do anything on his own. His mental and physical state changed too, but it was really unpredictable. But I was still gonna find a way to help my kid, no matter what. One weekend, my son woke up and gave me a piece of paper. I was pretty surprised when I saw what was on it. A list of ingredients to buy for a dish. My son can't write, so the words on the paper aren't pretty, but they're pretty clear. Especially these things can't go together. Potatoes, marshmallows, mustard, chicken, and a bunch of other stuff. I thought it was a waste of food, but to make my son a bit happier, I went along with it. After picking up the ingredients and getting home, my son was super excited and started cooking right away. He wouldn't let me do anything, so I just stood back and watched. When he finished, I had no idea what to even call the dish. It was this thick brown mess with a pretty bad smell. No way that could be called a dish. But seeing my son's happy face made me happy too. He was never this happy when his mom was still around. My son gently wrapped it in plastic wrap and put it in the fridge to keep it safe. I left it there for now and figured I'd toss it when he wasn't around. I totally forgot about that nasty dish in the fridge until the next morning. I rushed to the kitchen as soon as I remembered, but when I opened the fridge, the food was gone. The dish was washed and put under the sink. I called out to my son in a panic, like, how could he eat that? He's gonna be sick with diarrhea for days, maybe even weeks. My son came over, didn't say a word to my question, and just handed me another piece of paper. It was still a long list of stuff to buy: beef, gummy bears, celery, and so on. My son usually just writes his name with messy handwriting, so there's no way he wrote this piece of paper. I gave him a stern look and told him no. He started yelling and throwing stuff around. I felt totally helpless, trying to make my son happy again. That afternoon, another gross-looking and smelly dish appeared, all wrapped up and put in the fridge. I was set on finding a way to toss it once my son went to bed. That night, I checked the fridge and saw it was already eaten. I started to think my son wasn't the one who ate that gross food, because I'd been keeping an eye on him all evening. Going with my gut, I set up a camera in my son's room without telling him, and put 3 more around the house. In the middle of the night, my phone got an alert from the camera I had set up facing the backyard. At first, it looked like a dark shadow, but it was really weird. I zoomed in and saw it was a guy. His clothes were all ripped up, his beard was long and tangled, and his teeth were missing, filthy. He was holding a stick and pointing it at my son's window with a creepy smile. I quickly turned to the camera in my son's room. The kid stood at the window, grabbed the paper off the stick, and shoved it under the pillow fast. I jumped up and rushed out to the backyard with my gun. At that moment, I just acted on impulse. I didn't think about the gun laws and just kept firing into the dark around the yard. "Get out of here, bastard! What do you want with my son?" I yelled, and the thought of my son getting hurt made it impossible for me to calm down. About 15 minutes later, the cops showed up at my place, probably because the neighbors freaked out after hearing all those gunshots. I quickly explained everything and showed them the camera footage. Being aware of the situation, the cops said they'd look for that guy and asked me to hand over the gun right away. After talking to the cops, I dashed to my son's room, found the paper he had hidden under his pillow, and it was just a long list of stuff to buy. I tore up the paper, and my son saw it and started freaking out. It took him a long time to calm down and finally fall asleep. 2 days later, the cops said they'd found a guy's body in an old house at the end of the block, and his description matched what I'd reported. He was homeless and not all there mentally. They figured his cause of death was food poisoning that led to severe dehydration and sepsis. After hearing the news, I felt pretty mixed up. I went to my son's room, and he was sitting there drawing with total focus. I cried when I saw him. Maybe I had been too strict about his treatment. Even though the incident wasn't a big deal, it made me realize I wasn't taking care of him as well as I could. It was really tough, but I had to accept sending my son to the treatment center and visit him every afternoon after work. My son's doing better now. He can read and write pretty well.
I'm Alice, 26 years old, working as a switchboard operator for a hospital in Miami, Florida. My work is divided into 2 shifts, day shift and night shift. I often sign up to work the night shift because the night shift will have a higher pay. The work is not too difficult, but requires me to apply a lot of knowledge and skills at the same time. I will receive and handle calls to the hospital, provide information about services, support patients and customers, answer questions, and direct them to relevant departments. One evening, I was on duty. It was about 11 p.m. I received a call. Hello? How may I help you?
I called to ask for guidance on how to help a girl be happy again.
It was the voice of a man. I guess he was in his 40s. I was quite surprised by this case, but realized this was not an emergency. Maybe this man is quite meticulous in taking care of his loved ones. I asked him gently. I am very willing, sir. May I ask what your name is?
Logan.
Yes, Mr. Logan. I wonder if the person you are interested in is your wife or daughter?
She is not my wife or my daughter. We just met 2 hours ago. I already forgot her name.
His answer surprised me again, and I was silent for about 3 seconds. I asked him how she was doing. The man was silent for a moment, then spoke in a laughing voice.
She seemed very scared. She was crying. She seemed to be shaking.
Can I talk to her, sir? The man immediately refused when he heard my suggestion. He said he wanted to take care of the girl himself. I patiently continued the conversation with a bad feeling about this man. I hastily asked for the man's current address. He laughed.
Let me think for a moment. There are so many people here, so many. They are all lying quietly at my feet.
I remained silent at Logan's confusing answer. He suddenly laughed, said he was just joking, and read the address to me. Working very quickly on the computer, I realized it was an area near the cemetery, about 20 kilometers from the hospital. Suddenly, a girl's moans rang out from the other end of the line. I listened attentively. The moans seemed to come out while being gagged. Is something wrong, sir?
Oh, no. My girl is a bit resistant. I don't like this at all.
I heard a punch or something. I'm sure it was the sound of force being applied to the human body. I was very confused with all the inferences. That man spoke up.
She's better now, but she's looking at me with angry eyes.
I try to reassure myself and do my job properly. Mr. Logan, please let me speak to... Before I could finish my sentence, a painful sound rang out very clearly. Next was some sticky sound. My heart beat fast. I felt scared and creepy with my own speculations. On the other end of the line, a creepy laugh rang out.
She didn't look at me anymore, nor did she protest. She was sleeping on the floor.
I didn't answer anymore. My hands worked quickly on the computer. I quickly dispatched the ambulance and police car to the location the man named Logan had provided. After nearly 20 minutes, police cars and ambulances arrived at the location I identified. It is the guard building of a local cemetery. After calling loudly and no one responded, the police immediately rushed in. The scene inside the room made all the police and medical staff present there freeze. On the floor is the intact body of the female guard. All of her toes and fingers were severed. Blood splattered all over the walls, floors, tables, and chairs. She lost both eyes. The mouth was sewn tightly shut. The clothes have many rough cuts. All cameras in the cemetery were stolen. 2 surveillance computer screens were also smashed. The police also could not collect any further evidence to investigate the man named Logan. The following days I was filled with regret. I should have called the police sooner when I noticed something unusual. I heard the entire process of that pervert murdering the female security guard without being able to save her. Police are still actively looking for information about Logan. I'm also not sure if the name he called himself is accurate or not. About a week later, I'm also on the night shift. On duty that day, there were many accidents and emergencies. My mind was extremely stressed. I had just rested a bit. At around 12 o'clock, the phone rang again. I regained my composure and answered the phone with a professional attitude. The other end of the line was silent for a moment, then spoke.
Do you remember me?
I immediately fell into panic, because I immediately recognized that voice as Logan's. Before I could react, he continued to haunt me. He accurately described my physical characteristics and the clothes I was wearing. Even scarier was the mole on the back of my neck, which he could also see. I stood up in fear and looked around the office. Logan's loud laughter rang out from the phone. The perverted and disgusting voice made my limbs weak.
Do you want to spend a memorable night with me?
My name is Taylor. 12 years ago, when I was still a naive 9-year-old girl, I had a close friendship with Maddie. We were in the same class and lived in the same neighborhood, so we were always inseparable, like a pair of twin sisters. Both of our parents loved each other's friends, so I often stayed over at Maddie's house, and he did the same. My house was at the end of the neighborhood, while Maddie's house was in the middle. Everything here was very peaceful and gentle, from the neighbors to the animals they kept. Dogs were the most common pets in my neighborhood. The lovely and friendly 4-legged friends with all sorts of sizes and colors. I really loved dogs, and many times I asked my parents for permission to have a small dog. But my parents didn't agree, because I was still too young to take responsibility for an animal's life. That made me long even more to have a loyal companion by my side. One afternoon, when Maddie and I were playing in front of her house, there were no adults at home. A man whom neither Maddie nor I had ever seen in the neighborhood before appeared. He was walking a large, light yellow dog, which I later learned was a Labrador. The man called out to Maddie and me, saying that we could pet his dog if we wanted to. We often did the same with other dogs in the neighborhood, so we were excited and ran over. But the man's dog smelled very bad, as if it hadn't been bathed in months. I noticed that the dog seemed quite lethargic and tired, constantly scratching, causing fur and dirt to fly everywhere. The owner of the dog was a tall man with a thick beard that covered most of his mouth, but his head was shaved and shiny. He stared at us intently, and the constant smile hidden beneath his beard trembled ever so slightly. With my hands were covered in dirt and dog hair, That made a picky girl like me feel uncomfortable. Maddie was still happily petting the dog, while I just stood there watching. The man took out a camera and offered to take a picture of us playing with his dog. I didn't answer, while Maddie happily agreed. I noticed the smile on the man's face become increasingly frightening. The clicking sounds and the constant flash of the camera made me feel very uncomfortable. His posture while taking the pictures became more hunched, and the camera moved closer and closer toward Maddie. I pulled Maddie's hand to stand her up straight and told her I wanted to go inside to wash my hands. The man seemed displeased with me, but quickly regained his smile and made a new suggestion. He said we could come to his house on the next street, where there were lots of candy and 2 adorable cats. Maddie clapped her hands in excitement and immediately agreed, while I just wanted to go wash my hands right then. I didn't feel comfortable at all with the man in front of me, especially his gaze and smile. Seeing that I seemed hesitant, he added more words to stimulate Maddie's excitement. He told me to go inside and wash my hands. He would wait to go with me. I was hesitated for a moment, then quickly ran into the house, quickly washed my hands with water, and ran back out. But Maddie and the other man were gone. I ran out of the house in a panic, shouting Maddie's name as I ran. The thought of losing her made me extremely panicked. I ran home, crying and telling my parents to quickly find Maddie. After hearing me recount everything, my parents immediately called Maddie's parents and the police. I observed everyone's reactions and sensed that the situation was very serious, which made me even more panicked, and I couldn't stop crying. By that evening, I heard the police announce that they had found the man's house, and Maddie was also found inside. In his house, the police found many photographs of young girls taken from various angles and distances. After being examined, the doctor concluded that Maddie showed signs of abuse, but fortunately, it was at a mild level. The perverted man's name is Dominic, 56 years old, and he had to stand trial for 2 consecutive charges. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison and will continue to be monitored after serving his sentence. My mom took me to visit Maddie at the hospital, and fortunately, she was doing very well. I promised that I would never leave Maddie alone again, and she promised to always be careful with everything.
Welcome back to MHS, Midnight Horror Stories. I know that many of you turn to these videos as a gentle way to unwind and ease into sleep. So before you drift off tonight, could you help me with a small favor? Just leave a quick interaction, a comment, a like, or let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. My goal is to hit around 200 likes within the first 24 hours. Simple actions like these help YouTube appreciate the content and spread the show to more people. Now then, let's dive into tonight's horror stories. I was 15 at the time, living a peaceful life with my family in Portland, Maine. I only had 2 close friends, Greg and Mark. Mark had just moved to Portland a year ago. Despite his quiet and sometimes strange personality, we became an inseparable trio. That Labor Day, Greg excitedly announced a short trip to a small island in Casco Bay. Greg said his parents wanted to invite us along. We immediately agreed. But as much as I was looking forward to it, the trip didn't go so smoothly, at least for me. I had a cold from the night before, and I was sneezing and blowing my nose the entire long drive. Mark and I also argued about some trivial things, but we were used to it, as we often did that. The ferry ride to Long Island was the only enjoyable experience of the day. I stood at the railing, feeling the sea breeze and watched the seagulls flying overhead. For the first time all day, I felt relaxed. Greg's family's house wasn't too big, but it was still comfortable and well-equipped. The first day passed normally. We rode bikes to explore the island, went swimming, and played soccer on the beach. But on the second day, I couldn't find my favorite Yankees cap. To me, that item was more precious than anything. Greg said maybe I had left it on the beach, but I distinctly remembered putting it on the nightstand before I went to bed. In the afternoon, one of the pens from my collection also disappeared. It was a special pen with my name engraved on it. I started to feel uneasy. Personal belongings couldn't just vanish like that. That night was when things got weird. I woke up and saw that it was still dark, so I lay still, trying to go back to sleep. But then I heard a noise. Listening more closely, it was a whisper. I strained my ears to listen. It was coming from the bunk bed above me, where Mark was sleeping. But I couldn't make out what he was saying. I guessed he was talking in his sleep. We had a lot of activities during the day, and were pretty tired. After a while, the whispering stopped. I fell back asleep without even realizing it. The next day, we were playing volleyball on the court for a while when Mark said he needed to go to the bathroom. I continued playing with Greg. A few minutes later, I looked up at the house. In one of the second-story windows, I saw Mark's face staring down at the court. I blinked, and Mark was gone. I asked Greg if his house had a bathroom on the second floor. Greg looked at me strangely and said there was only one bathroom downstairs. That evening, as Greg's family was getting ready to go to a local restaurant for dinner, I pretended to be sick so I could stay at the house. When everyone had left, I lay on my bed and thought. The whispering last night, Mark's face in the window, the missing items. Then a terrible thought occurred to me. I decided to check Mark's bed. My jaw dropped when I found my Yankees cap in his bag. I rummaged through it and found a bunch of my personal items that I didn't even know were missing. There was a pair of nail clippers my mom had packed for me, along with my spare toothbrush, and most alarmingly, a pair of my underwear. I didn't know what to think. I was about to cry when I noticed something else in the bag. His notebook. To this day, I regret picking up that notebook. My hands trembled as I flipped through the pages. They were pencil drawings. Monsters with sharp teeth, nightmarish creatures with multiple legs and eyes, and scenes of horrific violence. People being run over by cars, stabbed, cut up, and tortured. There were also images of creatures that looked like winged, horned demons. But what stunned me were the last few pages. They were all drawings of me in different positions, but all of them were terrifying, including an image of me being nailed to a cross with my legs missing. Another page just had my name, David, scribbled over and over again, as if Mark had sat there for hours just writing my name. The last page was what was truly haunting. At the top of the page was my name, written in large capital letters, David. Below it was a smaller handwritten note, I will do it tomorrow. I dropped the notebook. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. When I heard the car returning, I quickly put everything back in the bag, except for the notebook. I needed the evidence. When everyone was asleep, I pulled Greg's dad out into the hallway and whispered everything to him. At first, he didn't believe me until I showed him Mark's notebook. Greg's dad also found it alarming. He told me to put everything back as it was. When I put the notebook back, I tore out one page. Greg's dad then told everyone that there was a family emergency and that we had to end the trip early. As we hurriedly packed our things, I could feel Mark's eyes staring at me. The ferry ride back to the mainland was the longest of my life. Mr. Tom dropped Mark off at his house first. On the way to my house, he told me that he had spoken with Mark's parents and that it would be best if I didn't tell my parents about this because the two families were very close, but I couldn't keep it a secret. As soon as I walked into the house, I burst into tears and told my parents everything. They were furious and called the police immediately. I had to tell the story to the police 3 times. The page I had torn from the notebook was used as evidence to get a search warrant. They found the notebook and all of my belongings, except for the pen, which was never found. My parents never mentioned it again after that. I never saw Mark again. His family moved away within a month. I also never spoke to Greg after that trip because my parents were so angry that Greg's dad wanted to keep everything a secret. Now, every time I think back, I still get shivers remembering Mark's eyes and the last pages of that notebook. I wonder if I hadn't pretended to be sick and stayed home that day, would I still be here to tell this story? My girlfriend Natalie and I had been dating for almost a year. She loved to explore new places, and I needed to escape the suffocating atmosphere of the city. We decided to rent a cabin on Airbnb for a short trip over Labor Day weekend. According to the website, the cabin was in Durham, North Carolina, nestled among tall oak trees, with a spacious front porch and large windows that let in a lot of natural light. The price was reasonable, and the owners seemed easygoing. The drive from our place to Durham took almost 3 hours. The GPS led us onto a small dirt road. The cabin appeared after a curve, but in person, it looked deserted and lacked the cozy feel from the photos. The air was colder than I thought it would be. There was no lock on the door. The doorknob turned easily, but the door seemed stuck. I had to push hard to open it, and it made an unpleasant creaking sound. Inside, the cabin was fully furnished, with a stone fireplace and large windows that let in sunlight. But there were details that made us frown. In the sink, there were 3 dishes with dried food residue. The refrigerator had some leftover food. Near the TV, there was a blurry photo frame of a man. We didn't feel completely comfortable, but we had traveled a long way and the cabin was generally okay. Maybe the previous guests had just left, and the owner hadn't had time to clean up. We decided to ignore it and continue to enjoy our trip. We started cleaning up and unpacking our bags. In the evening, we cooked dinner together and watched a movie, with Natalie curled up next to me on the sofa. Around 10 p.m., we heard a noise outside. At first, we didn't pay attention, but then the sound became clearer. It was a car engine. I went to the window and gently pulled the curtain back a little to look outside. It was an SUV, parked right in the driveway. A tall man moved with an alarming confidence. Natalie turned off the TV at my request, and the room was plunged into darkness. We stood still, watching the strange man. Instead of going straight to the front door, he went around to the back of the house. I saw him pull something out of the trunk of his car, a large gray bag that looked very heavy. The shape of the bag gave me goosebumps. He went deep into the backyard, disappearing from view. His confident and decisive actions truly unsettled us. A few minutes later, the sound of a shovel rang out steadily. We moved to the window overlooking the backyard and saw him digging a hole with the bag from earlier placed next to it. Our suspicions were now confirmed. Natalie was in a total panic. She whispered to me about calling the police and accidentally kicked the leg of a table, making a pretty loud noise in the quiet night. Both of us froze in place. Natalie looked at me with her eyes wide and round with fear. The next second, footsteps sounded, and a flashlight beam shone into the living room window. We stood there, frozen, unable to think or react. I could hear Natalie's quick breaths in my ear. The footsteps stopped, the flashlight shone directly at the window, and swept around. How can an intruder be so brazen? The footsteps continued, and then stopped at the front door. I heard a metallic sound. Maybe he was checking the lock. The doorknob turned slowly. A small click sounded, and the door was kicked open. The man walked in with a menacing look. In his hand was a handgun. To make things worse, he even knew where the light switch was. I could see his face clearly. Feeling a sense of familiarity, I looked at the photo hanging on the wall. "Who are you?" he yelled, pointing the gun straight at us. I raised my hands, and Natalie fearfully hid behind me. "We rented this house," I said. "I'm the owner of this house. No one is allowed to be here." His voice had a hint of surprise. The gun was still pointed at us. I opened the booking app and showed it to him. He looked at the screen. His eyebrows furrowed, and his mouth opened a little. This can't be, he mumbled, his eyes still glued to the phone screen. The gun was lowered a little, and that was our chance. I signaled to Natalie with a quick nod. We grabbed hands and ran straight for the back door. "Stop!" he yelled and chased after us. The back of the house was shrouded in darkness with only the faint moonlight. We ran straight into the woods, not daring to look back. I could hear him running behind us. We kept running deeper into the woods. The sound of his footsteps began to fade. Maybe he decided not to chase us anymore, or he got lost in the darkness. When we felt we had run far enough, I took out my phone and called 911. My voice was trembling as I described the situation to the operator. There was an armed man in the house we rented, and we suspected he had just buried something in the yard. The police arrived, and we led them to the cabin. The man was gone, along with his SUV, but the bag was still there, half buried in the newly dug hole in the backyard. Inside was the decomposing body of a man. Natalie almost fainted when she saw the scene. We immediately packed our bags and moved to a hotel. Natalie was in a bad mental state. She couldn't sleep and cried a lot. Early the next morning we left, and I took her straight to the hospital for care. The investigation later revealed a more complicated story than we had imagined. The man in the bag was a real estate agent. The killer was Tom Bradley, the real owner of the house. The agent had threatened to sue Tom over a $600,000 debt. They had a violent argument last week. Bradley had beaten the agent to death with a golf club and then brought the body back to the house to dispose of it. We had rented the house from a sophisticated scammer, and he had vanished without a trace. The police couldn't find any information about his real identity. Bradley was arrested at a friend's house 3 days later while trying to wash the bloodstains off his SUV. He was charged with first-degree murder and faced life in prison without parole. Since then, we have never rented a place through online booking sites again. I don't go camping alone anymore. The back window of my car in the garage still has a crack that I haven't fixed. 7 months have passed since Labor Day weekend last year, but I'm still haunted and terrified. I'm Lucy, 26 years old, and I work at an accounting firm in Columbus, Ohio. Every long weekend, I usually escape the city for somewhere quiet. Kayaking has been a hobby of mine since college. I love the feeling of gliding on the water, taking in the fresh scent of nature. Hocking Hills is always my top choice. This area has many small lakes and crystal clear streams. I chose Rose Lake, a small lake 2 miles away from the main road, surrounded by dense oak and pine forests. Few tourists know about this place. On the first morning of my trip, I drove to the campground. The parking lot only had 3 cars, including mine. I was happy about that. Fewer people meant I could relax without listening to the radio or kids screaming. I set up my tent near the lake. The cool September air blew against my skin, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. I felt the tension in my shoulders melt away after a stressful work week. After I finished unpacking, I pulled my kayak into the water. Since I'm very experienced at kayaking, it only took a few quick moves for me to paddle to the middle of the lake. I paddled along the shore, admiring the old oak trees. The steady sound of my paddle cutting through the water made me feel at peace. A while later, as I was paddling near the eastern shore, I heard the rustling of dry leaves. I glanced over and saw a man walking out of the woods, standing on the shore about 30 yards from me. He was middle-aged. He suddenly waved and smiled widely. I froze for a few seconds. The smile wasn't friendly, as his teeth were yellow, and he was staring at me too intently. I'm polite to everyone, so I nodded back and quickly changed direction. The man stood still, with his hand on his hip, watching me. I paddled faster, heading toward the opposite shore. When I looked back, he had disappeared into the woods. I breathed a sigh of relief, thinking he was gone. A few minutes later, as I was enjoying the silence, I suddenly heard a noise behind me. The distinct sound of a breaking branch, followed by rustling leaves. I turned my head to look back. The man was hiding behind a tree. He was crouched low, moving from tree to tree. His eyes were still fixed on me like a predator. My heart started to pound. Was he following me? Was he stalking me? I tried to stay calm and paddled slowly as if I hadn't noticed him. My hand trembled as I reached for my phone in my jacket pocket. The screen showed no service. I cursed under my breath. All I could do was keep paddling, hoping he would get bored and leave. But every time I glanced back, he was still there and always kept me in his sight. He moved skillfully, his movements practiced as if he had done this many times before. Fear began to spread. Stories of women being attacked while camping alone flooded my mind. I swallowed hard. I had to do something right now. I turned my kayak toward him and yelled loudly, "Hey! I know you're watching me. I'm calling the police." He stopped but didn't answer. He just stood still behind the tree, watching me. I picked up my phone, my hand shaking as I pressed the call button and put it to my ear. "I have something to report. I'm at Rose Lake in Hocking Hills. There's a person following me from the woods." I looked straight at him and continued. He's about 40 years old, wearing a red and black plaid flannel shirt and jeans. He's hiding behind trees and making me feel very unsafe. This time, he reacted. I saw him flinch and then slowly back away. He looked at me for a few more seconds with an angry look, then turned and disappeared deep into the woods. I put the phone down and let out a sigh of relief. There was no call. My phone still had no service. I sat motionless in the kayak, listening to the sounds around me. There were no more noises, but I didn't dare to believe that he was completely gone. Maybe he was waiting somewhere else. I waited for a little longer, then quickly paddled back to the starting point, constantly looking around as a precaution. When I saw the shore in my car, I breathed a sigh of relief. I was almost there. But as I paddled closer, I saw something was wrong. The back left window of my car had been completely smashed. From a distance, I could see shattered glass scattered everywhere. I didn't dare to get close to the car and tried to be as quiet as possible, pulling the kayak onto the shore quickly and running into the woods to find a place to hide. With a shaking hand, I checked my phone. I was so happy I almost cried when a faint bar of service appeared. I immediately dialed 911. When the operator answered, I whispered about the situation and asked them to send the police right away. They told me to hide and absolutely not approach the car until help arrived. Almost 20 minutes later, I finally heard the police sirens. When I was sure I heard their command, I ran out of the woods. One officer was taking my statement when another officer near my car suddenly yelled that there was someone inside and told everyone to back away. My heart felt like it was going to jump out of my chest. The police drew their guns and ordered the person in the car to come out with their hands up. The back door slowly opened. It was him, slowly crawling out of the back seat. He raised his hands, his face was pale, and his eyes darted around like a cornered animal. He was immediately handcuffed. The police found a long dagger in his pocket. He had smashed the window to get into the car, waiting for me to come back. If I had gotten into the car without noticing him hiding in there, the consequences would have been unimaginable. I was speechless. My legs were shaking, and I couldn't stand up. The police gave me a ride home, and my car would be sent to me a few days later. The day I got my car back was the day I found out about the police investigation. His name was Dale, 43 years old. He frequently appeared at campgrounds in Ohio and Pennsylvania. I was the first victim he decided to act on. The police praised me for trusting my gut feeling and for my clever way of handling the situation. As for me, I still get shivers whenever I talk about it. 7 months later, the kayak is sitting in the garage, covered in a thick layer of dust. I haven't been camping again. Whenever my friends invite me to go on an outdoor weekend trip, I decline with different excuses, because I'm still haunted by his smile and the dagger in his pocket. I think about what could have happened if I hadn't been calm enough to trust my instincts and act wisely. Never ignore your gut feeling, because it can save your life.
My husband is Satan. I'm Cecilia, I'm 38 years old. 5 years ago, I had a happy family that others dreamed of having. Steve was my husband, and we were born in the same year. We married each other in our 33. I dedicated my youth, energy, and passion to my career. Fortunately, I finally achieved my goal. My husband also had his own profession. After marriage, due to my age, we decided to have a baby right away. But unluckily, my pregnancy was tough. We visited the hospital many times for checkups and advice from doctors. My hope was decreasing time to time. But Steve never gave up. He was always by my side. He was my source of love and positive energy. Money wasn't an issue, so we were willing to do whatever it took to have our baby. Once, after a follow-up visit at the hospital, I met a nurse named Charity in the hospital lobby. Knowing my situation, she asked a lot. She gave me a small black statue the size of 3 fingers with a strange shape. Charity told me to put the statue under the bed to get pregnant as desired. I didn't believe in spirituality, but Charity convinced me with her sincerity. I didn't talk to Steve about this. After getting home, I put the statue under the bed as Charity told me to do. Miraculously, I was pregnant 2 months later. Steve and I were overjoyed. The feeling of carrying a baby in my body was incredible. I had a healthy and smooth pregnancy, and then my family happily welcomed a baby boy who we named Richard. Unlike the pregnancy process, I felt exhausted and stressed after giving birth. Every time I touched Richard, he would cry, making me extremely helpless. Steve took me to a psychiatrist when noticing my health and mental condition alarming. After seeing a doctor and taking prescriptions, I felt much better. My son and I could interact and get closer. One day, I woke up and went out of bed. I stepped on something that hurt my feet. Upon closer inspection, I was startled to realize that the statue was the one Charity had given me nearly a year ago. I put the statue in a box and left it in the corner of the bookshelf. So, a series of inexplicable things happened to me that drained my mind and energy. One day I was in the kitchen preparing food with the maid. Through the baby monitor, I heard Richard crying in the room. Rushing to my son, I was surprised to discover that there was a black statue in his crib. The material resembled the old one I put away, but the shape was somewhat different. This statue had sharp horns, falling wings, and an extremely angry face. I was a little frightened. I picked Richard up and ran downstairs with the statue to ask the maid why it was placed in Richard's crib. But as soon as she saw the statue in my hand, the maid was terrified. She asked for leave and ran out of the house immediately without taking her belongings. I stood there, staring blankly with Richard in my hand. I went online to research the statue and got to know that this was Satan, a demon representing all the sins of the world. That night, I woke up and checked Richard on the monitor. I vaguely saw a tall, dark shadow standing right next to my son's crib. I got up and ran to his room in Steve's confusion. There was no one standing next to the crib. Richard was still sleeping soundly. Steve took me back to my room. He believed I was just confused because I'd been tired for days. He looked after our son, and I rested. Another morning, I went down to the basement to find some kitchen utensils. The light was out, so I had to use my phone's flashlight. I was freaked out when I saw scratch marks on the wall, like something out of a horror movie. The ventilation pipes were ripped, like something had bitten them. I told Steve about it, but he just assumed the rats had destroyed it and said we would soon renovate the basement. My mental state was deteriorating, along with Richard's frequent illnesses, made Steve very worried. He asked the last psychiatrist for help, but I still didn't improve at all. Steve organized a party so I could meet and chat with friends. After dinner, we sat down and talked to each other a lot. Suddenly, my friend Lena suggested playing the Ouija board, and everyone was really interested. Is there a seventh person in this room that we don't know about? As soon as Lena's question ended, the Ouija board started moving and spelled out a sentence. The child will be mine. I was so panicked. Steve tried to calm me down, saying it was just a game, but I didn't think so. Things started getting more and more serious, and I felt like Richard's safety was being threatened. The next morning, I went to the hospital to see Charity. I showed her the strange winged statue and told her to explain. Charity explained that this is a sacred statue that has been passed down in her family for many generations. Charity gave me a book and an ancient dagger. If you do exactly as the book tells you, the demon haunting your son will be eliminated. That night, I performed the ritual, just as in the book. After lighting the candles, I started walking around, holding the dagger and swinging it through the air. Right at the end of the ritual, I swung the knife really hard, and it went straight into Steve's shoulder. He had snuck in without me knowing. Luckily, the wound was not serious. After that incident, I stayed in a mental hospital for treatment. Steve visited many times hoping I would recover, but I was afraid I might harm him and even our son. I decided to stay in the hospital. That night, because I missed my son so much, I used my phone to look at Richard through the camera and just started bawling. Suddenly, there was this woman's voice, sounding like she was having a good time. I immediately switched to the camera in the living room. I installed that camera after seeing the shadow in Richard's room. I hadn't told Steve about this. I looked at the phone screen and was completely shocked by what I saw and heard. My husband and Charity, the nurse, were having intercourse right in my house. After that, those disgusting jerks even talked about taking my stuff. The worst part was, that bastard even planned to take my son and send him to an orphanage. So those two jerks staged the Satan statue, the ancient book, and that damn ritual. I cried all night. My love and trust were completely shattered. The next day, I called a lawyer and gave them all the proof, accusing Steve of cheating, trying to make me look crazy, and trying to take my stuff. After a week of intense treatment, I got out of the hospital and was ready to kick Steve out of my life for good. I filed both the lawsuit and the divorce papers with the court at the same time. He told the court that his friend helped him make the Satan statue and the shadow stuff. Even that Ouija board game was part of their scheme. I became a joke to those cold-blooded people. With those charges, Steve and his mistress had to do 10 years in prison and paid me a ton of money in compensation. Richard and I are living a nice, peaceful life now. Now that Richard is 5 years old, I'm open to another relationship, as long as the person is sincere and loving, not just for me, but also for my son. I'm Rose. I was born twice in my life. The first time was like any other child, born from my mother. The second time was when I escaped from her. I grew up with pain, breathing tubes, medication, and countless medical examinations. As I grew, my body became weaker, and I developed a host of ailments, including asthma, epilepsy, hearing impairment, blindness, the need for a feeding tube, intellectual disability, cancer, and more. There were many other illnesses that I couldn't remember. It seemed like every type of illness in the world had converged on my body. I couldn't go to school, make friends, or play and run around due to my frail body. I spent more time in the hospital than at home, and lying in bed took up almost half of my childhood. A hideous smile with decayed and jagged teeth from taking too many antibiotics. After several rounds of chemotherapy, my hair thinned out, and I agreed to let my mother shave it all off. At the age of 7, I had a bicycle accident, and I clearly remember the doctor telling my mother that I was completely fine. But after that fall, my mother said I had lost the ability to walk and would have to live my life in a wheelchair, needing her assistance to move around place to place. It sounded truly pitiful, but I never complained. I did everything my mother wanted and asked of me. At that time, I felt lucky to have my mother by my side. She was my entire world. People even praised me for my strength and will to live. Countless benefactors and charitable organizations donate and provide assistance for me. I even appeared on several famous television shows and was a guest speaker at seminars for people with disabilities. I live with an innocent soul, a high-pitched, whiny voice like that of a child. My parents divorced when I was only a few months old. According to my mother, my father was a cruel and irresponsible man. But later, I found out that those were lies my mother planted in my mind to fulfill her own grand purpose. During the stage of psychological and emotional changes, I began to become stubborn and rebellious toward my mother. I felt that there were billions of things to explore in the world out there, but my mother was always by my side, restricting me in every way. During an argument between my mother and me, I threw all the medication she was supposed to take for the day into the trash. That kind of subtle defiance excited me, and it continued for many days. Surprisingly, my body felt even healthier when I didn't take the medication. I stood up and walked on my own 2 feet. One time, a social worker came to our house because there was information that my mother had accused her of abusing me. From this, I learned that my mother's real name was not Megan, but Carmela. The reason my mother gave for using a fake name was to escape from my father, the husband she always described as abusive and cruel. I began to piece together memories from my childhood. My father loved me very much, even though we didn't live together. He always provided financial support. He never missed a birthday of mine. My father always offered me words of encouragement instead of the remarks that made me feel insecure about myself, like my mother did. Since I was young, my mother had required me to take many different kinds of medication. She advised me to always appear tired to gain sympathy and receive financial assistance. One time, I forgot and said that I felt very healthy. My mother squeezed my hand tightly as a reminder. To escape from my mother, I did something crazy and unforgivable. My boyfriend, whom I met online, was forbidden and harshly scolded by my mother. She even threatened to have him arrested for having a relationship with a minor. But in reality, I was already 19 years old at the time. He planned to come to my house in the evening, so he asked me to leave the door open. I heard my mother's screams, but they gradually faded away, leaving only silence. It was I who was partly responsible for my mother's death. After learning the whole truth about my mother, my emotions were a mix of shock, pain, and betrayal. At first, I felt stunned and found it hard to believe the truth that my 19 years of illness had been nothing but a deception orchestrated by the very mother I considered my whole world. I had to face the reality that my mother not only exploited me, but also destroyed my health future and childhood. The feeling of betrayal from the person closest to me plunged me into a state of rage, confusion, and utter despair. Even though I felt a bit relieved to escape my mother's control, the haunting memories of her death and my involvement in it prevented me from finding peace within myself. The story above is based on a true event involving Dee Dee Blanchard and Gypsy Rose Blanchard. This is a very famous mother-daughter duo in the United States, representing the resilience, optimism in all circumstances, and the boundless love a mother has for her child. Gypsy Rose Blanchard is known as a girl who suffered from various illnesses since she was very young, with only her mother by her side to take care of her. They received hundreds of thousands of dollars from benefactors and were helped by charitable organizations to build a house. This comfortable life was obtained through the scheme of Dee Dee Blanchard, who exploited her daughter's childhood and health. The story was uncovered when the police found Dee Dee's body in their home, and Gypsy had disappeared. Dee Dee's greed and cruelty destroyed her life and her daughter's, erasing the trust of many benefactors and the opportunities for those with disabilities who truly needed help. Gypsy had to serve time in prison, but when interviewed, she firmly stated that she felt more free in prison than when she was with her mother. When I was 7, my parents took me to Disneyland for the first time after a tough semester. Like a lot of other kids, I got pretty excited when my parents told me about the weekend plans. For some friends my age, going to Disneyland probably wasn't as hard to pull off or as rare as it was for me. My family wasn't rich or anything, but my parents always gave me the best they could, and I was really thankful for that. As a 7-year-old, I thought going to Disneyland would take forever to actually happen. The weekend I'd been waiting for my whole life finally showed up. I woke up very early, picked out my best outfit, and scarfed down breakfast without my mom even having to remind me. "I'm all charged up to have a blast all day," I said. The three of us got to Disneyland at 10 a.m. You gotta admit, kids have endless energy, and they get recharged super fast just by going to places they love. My family hit up the souvenir stand, and my parents grabbed some little stuff like keychains and magnets that were only a couple bucks. I wasn't into that stuff at all, but my eyes totally locked onto the Minnie statue right in the middle of the display. "Mom and Dad, can I?" I kinda hesitated, pointed at the statue, and gave my parents a hopeful look. Mom smiled and walked over to grab the statue, but then her smile faded, and she looked at me all worried before putting it back where it was. I got it. This wasn't the first time I'd been turned down, but I still really wanted that Minnie statue. The whole trip, I couldn't stop thinking about that statue. At the end of the day, I made an excuse to hit the bathroom, went back to the souvenir shop, and did something I shouldn't have, without even thinking about it. I quickly grabbed the Minnie figurine and stuffed it in my backpack. When I got home, I stashed the Minnie figurine in my room. At first, I was very happy and proud to have the thing I wanted, but I always felt a bit guilty about it, and that little mistake ended up costing me big time. I started to feel like someone was keeping an eye on me. I kept waking up in the middle of the night because I heard a soft rustling sound somewhere in the room. Sometimes, I'd catch a glimpse of a shadow in my dreams, with big ears and Minnie's signature red bow. When I woke up all of a sudden, the room was still quiet, and there was the Minnie figurine just staring at me, its big black eyes wide open and smiling. One day, I freaked out when I saw that the Minnie figurine I had left on the bookshelf was now sitting on my desk. At first, I figured I must have moved it by accident and just didn't remember. But when it kept popping up in other spots around the house, the kitchen, the bathroom, and even the living room, I started to get really freaked out. One night, while I was asleep, I felt like someone was standing at the end of my bed. When I opened my eyes, there was Minnie, just standing there quietly, staring at me with her dark eyes. She didn't move or say a word, just stood there, totally still, kind of creepy. I yelled really loud, shaking under the blanket. My parents ran over and I quickly threw back the covers and pointed to the corner of the room. But there was nothing there. As the days went by, Minnie's presence got more and more obvious and freaky. She showed up out of nowhere, no matter where I was, in the backyard or even in the shed. Minnie's quietness wasn't scary, but her sudden appearances and that blank look on her face started to freak me out more and more. As I was walking home from school, I saw Minnie standing across the street. Nobody around recognized her, just me. She stood there frozen again, staring at me with those lifeless eyes. I ran home, trying to escape the fear and that creepy feeling like Minnie could chase me at any moment. As the months went by, I started feeling worse and worse, both physically and mentally. My parents were worried about how I was acting, but I didn't dare tell them the truth about Minnie because I was scared they'd find out I stole the statue. Feeling desperate, I decided it was time to put an end to this haunting. I chucked the statue in the trash, but that gaze and smile were still staring right at me. I got mad, picked up the statue, raised it high, and slammed it down hard on the ground. The statue's body shattered, but Minnie's head was totally fine. And I swear I heard her laughing like she was mocking me or something. Minnie kept popping up in my dreams, all intact and quiet, with those deep eyes and that creepy smile. There she was, all messed up and bleeding, with those deep eyes and that scary smile. It felt like smashing the statue just made Minnie show up more, way more often, and way closer. I couldn't take it anymore, so I grabbed my piggy bank with all my savings and took it to the living room to confess everything to my parents. I'm sorry. I want to pay for that statue. I know I made a mistake. I'm really sorry. I was scared, helpless, and totally exhausted. After hearing everything, my parents didn't yell at me. Instead, they comforted me to help me feel better. The next day, my parents took me to Disneyland, but this time, I wasn't feeling happy or excited at all. My family talked to the management, and the souvenir shop owner apologized like crazy and gave the money back for the statue. I was super grateful they forgave me for my mistakes so nicely. I even went to church and told God all the stuff I messed up. I felt way better inside. I never saw Minnie again, and I'll always remember those creepy days as a lesson about messing up and what it can cost you. I realized that nothing is worth giving up your peace of mind. One time I told my wife she didn't have much time left. The reason I've got such wild jokes is partly because my wife, she's got a fun, upbeat, and kind of pervy personality. My mom passed away from a serious illness, and at the funeral, my wife pulled off this crazy stunt using ventriloquism from a course she took.
Help me. Let me out.
She copied my mom's voice and said it just as they were about to lower the coffin. My dad and I were stunned, and the funeral guests, some freaked out and ran, others straight up fainted from fear. Meanwhile, my wife was laughing and cracking jokes at her mother-in-law's funeral. Last time I got home from work, I hadn't even gotten out of the car before I was yanked into the house. My wife pushed me down on the couch, and with tears in her eyes, she said the lottery ticket we bought at the convenience store yesterday hit the jackpot. I have no idea why I totally believed my wife back then without even questioning it. I agreed to buy her all the brand name stuff she wanted with the cash I'd been hiding for ages. Even crazier, I called my boss and told him I was quitting and gonna buy the company. After I said that, my wife cracked up and nearly spit out all the orange juice she had in her mouth. I was shocked to see that I'd totally been played. I had to totally grovel to my boss, saying I drank way too much that day, which is why I was acting all wild. Honestly, that trick hurt like hell, and I've always thought about getting back at her somehow. A few days later, my wife's health took a nosedive out of nowhere. I could see how worn out she was, dealing with worse and worse stomach pain. She was not the cheerful and lively wife I knew anymore, and I really missed her. I took my wife to the doctor, and they said we'd get the results in 3 to 5 days. Those were some really tough days for my wife and me. I took some time off and spent all my days with my wife, doing all the stuff we'd been planning for ages. Some nights I cried holding her. We were planning to have a baby by the end of the year, but my wife totally saw those worries too. Chris, I'll be fine, or else I won't leave you hanging. I hugged my wife and cried like a kid without even realizing it. But that was just the start of the door to the first level of hell. 3 days after my wife went to the hospital, I got a call on my phone. It was the doctor. "Hello, Mr. Wilson. I'm calling to update you on your wife's condition. Can you hand the phone to her? I've tried reaching her a few times but couldn't get through." I begged the doctor to talk to me. I couldn't wait any longer and didn't want my wife to hear the results, good or bad, before I did. "You and your wife just keep enjoying your happy family life." So my wife was good, and I was just in tears. At that moment, my wife walked in, saw how I was acting, and got pretty worried and nervous. "That was the doctor, right? Why didn't you call me? Am I fine?" In a split second, it hit me to get back at them by bringing up my wife's life and death. "You don't have much time left. We don't have much time. I'm sorry." Going all out, I cried and hugged my wife, making my face look as painful as I could. But my wife didn't cry. She was totally emotionless. She pushed me away and went to the kitchen, and I kinda zoned out for a sec before following her. When I got there, she had a bottle of wine and 2 glasses ready on the dining table. "Let's grab a drink and chat for a bit." I thought to myself that I had to stick it out in this role of my life until the end, and then I woke up all tied up, standing against the wall. "What are you doing?" I freaked out when I saw my wife sitting with her back to me. She turned around right away, still looking emotionless, but she had a rifle in her hand. She stood at the end of the room, aimed right at me, and loaded the gun. I swear I almost wet my pants, like for real. "Maddie, honey, I'm not cool with this kind of joke." "Honey, there's no way I'm leaving before you. The thought of you living on and maybe marrying someone else is driving me nuts." "Maddie, please, I was just messing around. It was all a joke. I'm sorry. The doc said you're fine." I yelled when I saw my wife's finger on the trigger. God, I've known and been married to her for almost 10 years, and I never knew she had such dark thoughts. She put the gun down, thought for a few seconds, then tucked it back in that wooden box. The box I've always thought was just for decoration. I was panting, my heart racing like crazy, and sweat was pouring down. Then my phone rang, and this time my wife picked it up.
I'm really sorry, Mr. Wilson. I made some mistakes about your wife's results earlier.
Victor and I have been classmates since high school. When we went to college, we still attended the same school, and our bond grew stronger, making us even closer. After graduating from college, I was lucky to find a job in my field of study, with many opportunities for personal growth. But Victor wasn't as fortunate. He went through many different jobs, studied several other fields, and even held a fairly high position at one point. But then he found himself back at square one. His love life was no different. Victor loved with all his heart, but what he received in return was betrayal. For nearly 20 years, we have remained good friends, always sharing and ready to help each other. Then, one day, Victor cut off all contact and disappeared. The letter he left read, "I need some time for myself. I'm fine, so don't call the police or think anything bad has happened. And see you later, Dylan." I followed his wishes, because I knew that the hardships in his life had hurt him deeply. Perhaps it was best to leave him alone. After all, time heals all wounds. Nearly 6 months passed, and one day, while I was on my way to pick up Rose, my girlfriend, when I suddenly received a phone call.
Dylan!
"Victor!" I exclaimed when I recognized the familiar voice. "You've been gone for so long."
I'm sorry. I'll send you my address. Can you come here now?
"Like right now?" I asked in surprise, while looking over at Rose. My girlfriend smiled lightly and nodded, so I immediately agreed to Victor's request. The address Victor sent me was for a Chipotle restaurant on a busy street. The restaurant was quite small, new, and fairly crowded. Victor ran out from inside, and we happily embraced each other. "Don't tell me you're the owner of this place," I teased him a little. "You knew even before I even said anything? Is that true? Oh my God, my pal." Victor led Rose and me inside the restaurant, both of us in complete surprise. I've been running this place for over 2 months now, and luckily, everything is going pretty well. I was happy for Victor, hoping that he would truly succeed with this new venture. I introduced Rose to him, and the three of us enjoyed a fun and lively meal together. The burritos and tacos at Victor's place were absolutely perfect. "Did you come up with a new recipe, Victor? This is amazing." Victor smiled at me and said, "You'll always get the best service. Make sure to come by often." From then on, I made it a point to visit Victor's restaurant at least once a week, and I started recommending it to some colleagues and acquaintances. The customer flow remained steady, and I was happy for Victor. "You look pretty tired, Victor. Is the work too exhausting? I think you should hire some more staff." I felt worried when I saw Victor's gaunt face and the dark circles under his eyes. "I'm fine," Victor replied, his face showing no change. The next time we met, I found Victor in a much more upbeat and cheerful mood. It seemed that Victor had managed to adjust his schedule for proper rest, so his mood had improved. But the very next day, he seemed exhausted and drained again. Victor's mood swings made me worry. Every time I asked him, he would brush it off, insisting he was just busy with work. Gradually, it wasn't just fatigue anymore. I noticed bruises appearing on Victor's body, especially on his wrists. A few times, there were injuries that hadn't fully healed yet. The tipping point came one evening when Rose and I went to Victor's restaurant for dinner. As usual, he was the one who served us. That evening, Victor had a stiff smile with a lingering, haunted look in his eyes. He brought the dishes out with trembling hands, and they were covered with blood. Rose covered her mouth tightly to prevent screaming loudly and disturbing the customers around her. I quickly pulled Victor into the kitchen area, feeling the sticky sensation as soon as I touched his hand and the feeling of emptiness. Victor, his hand, only had 3 fingers left. My eyes widened as much as possible to take in as much visual information as I could, followed immediately by Rose's scream. I stumbled as I ran out. She was crawling on the floor with a plate of tacos in front of her. The filling inside was bright red fingers. The surrounding customers ran off. Some even puked on the spot, while Victor's insane laughter echoed. The police arrived after I made the call, 10 minutes later, and Victor was taken away. He just kept laughing, a haunting smile of emotions that couldn't be expressed. Victor couldn't cooperate with the police because he had completely lost his awareness and was taken to a psychiatric hospital for treatment. He had harmed himself by overdosing on illegal substances, which led to hallucinations and a loss of awareness. I went to the hospital to visit Victor after he had been receiving treatment for a week. "Victor, are you okay?" "Dylan." Victor looked at me and smiled, but that smile continued for 20 minutes, with Victor's eyes wide open but blank, devoid of any emotion. Perhaps he had endured too much pain from the broken family, the beatings from his perverse stepfather, and the countless hardships in his life. I still hope that one day Victor will recover, and I will always stand by his side.
I am Bree, 32 years old, and I have a small family with my husband Charles and our 5-year-old daughter Ashley. My family lives in Houston, the largest and most bustling city in Texas. I used to think I was lucky because I had everything that any woman could ever wish for, until it was December 3 years ago, the most beautiful time of the year. The streets of Houston were adorned with the beauty of winter. The roadside cafes emitted a strong, inviting aroma, Christmas trees sparkled, and the decorations were lit up in a variety of colors, a vibrant and lively picture, bringing a warm feeling amidst the cold atmosphere. The whole city was immersed in joy as people exchanged well wishes, ready to welcome a new year full of hope and blessings. My family was immersed in the festive atmosphere, and we decided to go shopping at Sam's Club, one of our family's favorite spots. As we entered the store, the sparkling lights and Christmas decorations everywhere made the atmosphere even more lively. My daughter held my hand tightly, her eyes lighting up as she saw the large gift boxes and the sparkling Christmas tree. My husband happily selected the items we needed for the family, occasionally turning around to smile at me and our daughter. We split up to browse the aisles, looking for decorations to beautify our home and finding surprise gifts for each other. Ashley was happy to choose a gift that she loved. Once we had bought all the necessary items, my daughter and I went to the checkout area to wait for Charles. But nearly 20 minutes had passed, and he still hadn't shown up. I called Charles several times on my phone, but he didn't answer. We patiently waited for another 20 minutes, but my daughter and I began to get anxious. It was time for me to start preparing dinner, and Ashley was getting frustrated and starting to cry. I had to ask the customer service to make an announcement over the loudspeaker to help find Charles. After a few minutes, he appeared with 2 shopping carts, one filled with colorful gifts and sweets. The other cart was filled with items like a chainsaw, bleach, soap, and deodorant spray. I was surprised and asked Charles the purpose of buying these items. My husband, looking tired, said that he wanted to repair a few windows and the door in the basement. I was even more surprised because Charles had never shown interest in or done tasks like that before. He would rather spend the money to hire a repair team to come to the house and use that time to be with our daughter or play sports.
But I didn't worry much anymore. Charles knowing how to take care of the house was a good thing. It took us quite a while to bring everything we bought back home. That evening, I suggested ordering takeout since it was getting late, but Charles said he wanted to have grilled meat. Although I explained that grilling meat would take a lot of time to prepare, Charles still wanted to have his favorite dish made by me. I was convinced and quickly started cooking. Charles said he would take the opportunity to repair the basement door while waiting for dinner. I told my daughter to play in the living room or in areas where I could keep an eye on her. So our family of 3 each had a different task to do. I focused on cooking, occasionally hearing the faint sound of the chainsaw and the sound of my daughter singing to herself. The house was quickly filled with the aroma of the grilled meat. I called out loudly to announce that dinner was ready, but there was no response from my husband or daughter. I walked to the living room, then changed direction toward the stairs leading down to the basement, calling out for Charles and Ashley as I went. When I was just a few steps away from the first step of the stairs leading down, Charles suddenly rushed up from below, holding Ashley in his arms and shouting loudly, which startled me. Charles's face was covered in sweat, and his eyes were filled with worry, barely concealing his panic. Charles staggered, barely managing to stop at the top of the stairs, his body tensed, as if he were fleeing from something. Seeing my surprise, Charles seemed a bit flustered for a moment before he held up Ashley's hand. She had injured her finger, and there was quite a bit of blood. Charles and I hurriedly took her upstairs. After treating Ashley's wound, the whole family had dinner together. Charles explained that Ashley had followed him down to the basement, and he blamed himself for not keeping an eye on her. When Charles realized what had happened, he immediately took Ashley upstairs, but didn't hear my calls. "Mom, my hand doesn't hurt at all." Ashley turned to look at me with her innocent eyes. I smiled and gently kissed my daughter's bandaged hand. Charles told my daughter and me not to go down to the basement because it was messy and dangerous. I agreed and then gave Ashley a thorough reminder. 2 days later was New Year's Day, and I happily prepared the traditional dishes for the special occasion. After finishing the repairs on the basement door and the windows in the house, Charles helped me clean up and decorate the dinner table. Since our family only had 3 people, everything was done quickly and efficiently. The dinner table was set warmly, and Charles expressed his gratitude for the care I always give to our little family. His wish for the new year was to have a 4th member join us. I was moved and hugged my husband. He pulled Ashley close, and we embraced each other tightly. Suddenly, Charles's phone rang, and he left to answer it. Ashley turned to look at me and expressed her wish for me to get another plate instead of cutlery. I smiled and told my daughter that the baby hadn't arrived yet, and for now, our family only had 3 members. "No, Mom, there's also the lady in the basement. I saw Dad and her. Our family has 4 people." I was utterly confused, looking at my daughter and then toward Charles, who was standing far away, talking on the phone. A cold shiver ran down my spine. We had a happy life, and I trusted him completely. Yet now, how could this be happening? Ashley approached and placed her small hands on my cheek, her innocent eyes examining me. I held back my tears, taking her small hand in mine. I was surprised to see that Ashley had removed the bandage from her wound at some point. There were no signs of any injury. Her hand was completely healed. I looked straight into my daughter's eyes and whispered, asking her about what she had seen in the basement. That woman was sleeping on the floor, and then Dad shoved her hands and legs into the box. "My hand isn't injured. Dad doesn't let me answer when you called." A feeling of panic surged within me, like a wave, sweeping everything away. Everything I had once believed in, all the happy memories, now shattered before my eyes, leaving only an indescribable fear. Hearing Charles say goodbye to his business partner before hanging up, I quickly told Ashley that this would be our secret and she must not tell her father. She smiled and nodded, just as Charles returned to the dining table, kissed both of us on the forehead, and happily began his meal. Looking at the man in front of me, feelings of doubt and fear surged within me exponentially. I will definitely find out everything. The house sank into an eerie silence after the New Year's party. Ashley was fast asleep, her eyes shut tight, her innocent face unaware of the turmoil within me. I sat alone in the living room, my mind spinning with the innocent yet chilling words from my daughter. She's sleeping on the floor, her hands and feet placed in the box. What's Charles hiding? What is lying in the basement? I looked towards the door leading down there, my heart pounding rapidly, my breath heavy. That night, after Charles had gone to bed, I waited until his steady breathing filled the room before deciding to take action. I quietly stood up, each step so light, as if afraid the floor would make a sound. The basement was always locked, but I had taken the key from Charles's coat pocket. My hands trembled as I opened the basement door, a cold gust of air rushing straight into my face. I raised my phone and turned on the flashlight. Each old wooden step creaked under my feet. The faint light from the flashlight swept through every corner, illuminating the damp walls covered in cobwebs. A foul, rancid smell lingered, causing my stomach to tighten in disgust. I looked more closely and noticed wooden boxes stacked haphazardly in a corner. Dark red stains were splattered on the floor, as if someone had tried to clean them, but couldn't quite erase them. When the flashlight beam landed on a large open box, I stopped. My heart felt like it was about to jump out of my chest when I saw a light blue floral dress draped over the edge of the box. It was wrinkled and covered in mud. Beneath it were long, jet-black strands of hair. I stepped back, my hands trembling, unable to believe my eyes. She was lying asleep on the floor. Ashley's words echoed in my head, making me even more panicked. I forced myself to go back to the bedroom. That entire night I stayed awake, lying next to Charles, but my heart was filled with unfamiliarity and fear. The next morning, when Charles was getting ready to leave for work, I tried to act normal, but my eyes couldn't hide the daze. As soon as Charles closed the door and stepped outside, I immediately called the police. I had no other choice. The feeling of fear and doubt had become more than I could bear. The police arrived with the forensic team. The basement was quickly sealed off. The whole house seemed to be immersed in the footsteps and voices of strangers. I held Ashley as she sat on the sofa, and she occasionally mumbled about her being in the basement. The police chief approached, his cold eyes staring at me. "Bree, we have found a body." I almost collapsed. The woman in Ashley's story was real. The police chief continued speaking, but every sound seemed to fade away in my mind. My whole body was numb, and my heart was pounding erratically. I looked at Ashley. She was holding a small doll tightly in her hand, her gaze still innocent, but her words now echoed in my mind. I was asked to stay in the living room while the police searched every corner of the basement. The sound of footsteps, the clinking of metal tools against the cold concrete floor, and the occasional heavy breathing echoed through the house. The smell of bleach wafting up from the basement made me feel nauseous, but I couldn't take my eyes off the door leading down to it. A little while later, a young police officer stepped up, his face pale. He exchanged a few whispered words with the police chief. His cold eyes were now fixed on me. "Ms. Bree, we need to ask you to come to the station for a statement." His voice was deep but firm. I nodded, my legs feeling like they had lost all sensation. I tried to keep Ashley close, the fear that she would be caught up in something terrible overwhelming me. As we were taken out of the house, the harsh sunlight highlighted the police cars with their flashing lights, and the neighbors stood in groups, pointing and gossiping. At the police station, I was seated in a small room. A female police officer gently asked me about my relationship with Charles, his recent habits, and anything unusual I had noticed. It turned out that everything I had once thought was happiness was just a perfect mask that Charles had built. Meanwhile, Charles was escorted into another interrogation room. They showed me the surveillance footage. He sat there, his head lowered, his face dotted with sweat, and his eyes like someone pushed to the brink. His first words were like a confession. He admitted to having an affair. Charles stated that a few months ago, when his business was facing difficulties, he sought out a young woman who worked at a bar to relieve his stress. At first, it was just secret meetings, but the relationship quickly spiraled out of control. The woman began demanding more, even threatening to expose the affair if he didn't comply. That night, in a drunken stupor and under the influence of drugs, Charles arranged to meet her at a hotel to settle everything. But the meeting turned into a heated argument. In the heat of the moment, Charles became a killer. When he realized what he had just done, he panicked, not knowing how to handle the situation. In that desperate situation, a disgusting thought arose. Charles decided to bring the body home, to destroy it by dividing it into parts and storing it in wooden boxes in the basement. Charles chose that place because he thought that neither I nor Ashley would ever go down there. But what he didn't expect was that Ashley had secretly followed him and witnessed everything. I cupped my face, a feeling of disgust overwhelming me, not just for Charles, but for myself as well, for having lived with such a person all these years. The memories that once seemed happy were now shrouded in a terrifying dark veil. Charles was arrested, then charged with first-degree murder, and faced a life sentence. The house, once my home, became the scene of a horrific crime, forever unable to be returned to. I decided to move in with my sister in another city to start a new life. Every evening, I sit beside Ashley, watching her face as she sleeps peacefully, telling myself that I will never let her remember what happened. But I knew well that no matter how far I ran, the darkness of the past would haunt me forever.
Mm-hmm.